right? Pregnant mom.
There we go. Welcome to the Second Line Show. I'm Nola Nash. Let's let the good times roll. Hi, welcome to the Second Line Show. I am your host, Nola Nash. Thank you for joining us today. Whether you're joining us on Facebook or whether you're joining us on YouTube Live, thank you so very much for being here. And if you're joining us after the live show, please go ahead and leave those comments. We do check back in with those. We would love to see what you have to say about today's show and answer any questions that you might have as we go along. For those of you who are joining us live, please go ahead and leave a comment or question, and we'll work through some of those as we go along. But for now, first things first, I want to let our guests introduce themselves to you before we get going in our chat. So we've got some wonderful folks here, some good friends of mine, and the fabulous Art Bell is also here. So we've got Mike, Laura, and Art. Let's see, since Mike, you are right over here to me. I'm gonna let you start first. We got our Brady Bunch thing.
Isn't it?
Right, totally. We're totally Brady Bunching. Hey, I'm a mime. I'm stuck in here. Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Eberhardt. I'm a voiceover artist, specifically audiobook narration. I just released an audiobook called Identity, The Adventures of Kyler Scott, CIA operative in Italy, and crazy things happen. I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for joining us tonight.
All right, Art, I'm going to save you for last because I want you to have the full force of our little party going on here. We'll explain what we're doing here in just a second. So, Laura, I'm going to give the floor to you, my dear.
I don't have my book. I just realized.
It's on a slide at the end. It's okay.
Well, okay. My name is Laura Kemp, and I have a green party hat on. I am also an author. I released my debut, over a year ago. It's called Evening in the Yellow Wood. It has a big yellow leaf on it, if you can imagine it, because I don't have it. But you'll see it at the end.
Fabulous leaf.
Big yellow leaf. And I also have the sequel releasing the beginning of November. And beyond that, I'm a mom and a wife, and I've been running around to cross-country meets tonight, and I'm still ready to party. And see this thing behind me, all the kids and all the animals and all the pets out of the show, although that would add to the fun probably.
It would. This is an unscripted, often derailed show. So perfect. I mean, pets and kids just kind of go right along with the theme. Absolutely. Well, Art, you launched a book last week, and I know how hard it is to launch a book online. So since, the theme of our show is largely New Orleans, because that's my jam, we know how to party in the Crescent City. So we aren't going to let you have, just a boring launch week. We're going to consider this still launch week for you. So we're having a party on your behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Art Bell. Art, go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks, please.
First of all, thank you for the surprise party, because one of the reasons I wrote the book was to do a launch party. And of course, with the virus and everything, I couldn't really do one, but now I have one, and I'm so touched. Thank you very much. I am Art Bell. I was in the television business for a long time. And when I was at HBO in the 80s, I convinced them to do an all-comedy network, which they were not too hot on doing at the time. And I wrote a memoir about it, and it came out last week, and it's called, here it is, Constant Comedy: How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor.
I love that title.
I know, it's great.
It's a great title.
It's a fabulous title. Fabulous title. And Art, I've had the privilege of seeing some of your other interviews, reading the Forbes article. Congratulations on that. What a great piece that was, too. Right. So you've made kind of a splash here with this book. So congratulations on that, as it's coming out, some great reviews and great folks that you have had the privilege of working with in your life, and friends that you have that have really kind of championed this book for you as well. And I guess my first question for you is, what does it feel like? I know you had another book that was out that you did when you were with Comedy Central Web Sightings, and that is so awesome, but it's also so long ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, not currently in print right now. Is that true?
That is correct.
Okay. So kind of making the leap back into the author world, coming out of television and back into being an author. What is that like? How does that feel, actually kind of stepping out there and doing that now?
Well, first of all, I am thrilled to be a writer. I was in television for a long time. You have to write a lot of stuff, including, sometimes some script work and everything else. But I never wrote a book, and I never even considered writing a book. The way this book came about is I was writing stories about my childhood, and I had a writing group, and they said, and one day I wrote a story about Comedy Central, and they said, wow, that's cool. Why don't you tell more stories like that? And I said, you mean you didn't like the last 150,000 words I wrote about being a kid in New Jersey? We like that. But this was interesting. So I started to write some more stories, and then I realized that I had a really kind of crazy adventure starting that channel and then living through what I did and then leaving the channel. And I thought it would make a great story to tell for people who are interested in how things happen like that. So I told it.
I love it. Now, I know that as we're putting things together, we research the books that we write. We research, Mike researches characters and voices that he does. And for you lived this. And how did you go about deciding what makes it into the book and what doesn't? I mean, where did you decide to draw the line? Or, were there some things that you were just itching to tell and other things you kind of had to debate about for a while? I mean, it's a memoir. It's your life. You're entitled to it all. But I know it's not all in there. So how did you kind of refine that down to the stories that did make it into the book?
Well, it wasn't all that hard at the beginning because I really wanted to tell stories about things that happened to me and that I was there. So I didn't tell any stories that I'd heard about Comedy Central. I didn't tell other people's stories to the extent, I don't think that's a great idea. I did have one person tell his story in the book because I thought it was such a touching story when I heard it the first time. And it was important to the book. But for the most part, I told the stories I'd been thinking about for years, that these are the things that happened as I was trying to get comedy up and running and how hard it was. And I also put some stuff in about my childhood, and I did take some of that out. I put relevant stories from my childhood, about how I liked comedy as a kid, or there's one thing where we had a tagline about that used death in the tagline. It was like, comedy death thing, which gets done a lot. Actually, the tagline was, "We're all going to die. Watch Comedy Central," which was a really early tagline. And we had to get attention, so we used that tagline. But I told the story of when I first confronted death. When I was a kid, when the neighbor, my friend, who was also 5 years old at the time, told me that her grandmother died, and I had no idea what that meant, Mm-hmm. So I asked my mother, and it's a story. I won't tell you the story, but it was a good story. And I tried to connect my adventure to things that had happened to me in the past a little bit, and I think it worked out.
I think it's important too, especially when you're writing a memoir, that people know the person who's telling the story. And since you were really behind the scenes with Comedy Central and the birth of Comedy Central, and coming from the very beginnings of it, the merger with MTV, and all of those things that you had to go through, you're really behind the scenes. And so for you to tell this story, I think the personal angle is actually very important to kind of anchor the readers in who you are and why this story is important to you, not just, here's the guy that created Comedy Central. Well, okay, so he's going to talk to us about Comedy Central. It makes the stories more human, I think, when we actually know the person who's experiencing those things, as opposed to kind of this person in an ivory tower out there who's done this thing, with this channel that we all know, we all love, and we've grown up watching forever and ever. It's like the great part of my young adulthood is Comedy Central. And so without kind of your personal touch to anchor it, I think it might actually have lost a little bit. I'm glad that you left those things in there so that the readers get to know who you are as well.
Yeah, I think, and you asked about what I put in and left out. I think that those were the hardest decisions. You know, should I put that story in about when I was a kid? Does it work well telling the comedy story, which is really my main objective? That was a challenge. I do have to mention though, you talked about the book that we published at Comedy Central. That was like 1996 or something.
Uh-huh.
It was kind of, have you seen it? It's kind of a joke book. I mean,
Yeah.
not jokes, but the internet had just gotten started.
Mm-hmm.
And we were working on the internet, trying to do funny stuff on the internet at the time. And they put me in charge of that. And we thought the internet was a riot, just the way it was developing. So we did this book called Websites We'd Like to See, right? And it was really kind of a satire on the web at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was nothing. Putting that book together, and I did it with two other guys, Vinny Favale, who went on to fame and fortune, and Dr. Dave Colin, who's a radio personality, maybe some of you guys ran into, but I did it with them. And so that's a lot different from writing a memoir.
Yes.
First of all, I was doing it with two other guys. It was a joint project, and we had artists involved and everything else. Writing a memoir is very kind of personal and private and almost lonely, although I never felt quite lonely because, my wife read everything and I had a writer's group and, people were helpful. But it was an interesting experience because I'd write it, I'd read it, I'd feel sometimes really great about it, or I'd feel sad that I had that experience or whatever. So it was really kind of it was like nothing I'd ever done before, I think. And I'm glad I did it.
So of all the people, yeah, go ahead, Mike. No, go ahead.
Oh,
I liked your question better. I know where you were going with that. I like your question better.
Don't mind me. I'm just going to interrupt at random. But, was it cathartic to write those things out? As a private person, I have a lot of things in my life that I don't share with other people, and to air that publicly would be very. I don't know what that would feel like for me as a person. What was that like for you?
It's a good question. I'm a very private person generally. And I wouldn't say it was cathartic. It was more about having a story I really wanted to tell and knowing that in order to tell that story, I was going to have to put myself out there. I mean, I studied a lot of memoir before. I had read a lot of memoir anyway, and what I learned from the memoirists is they'd say in their acknowledgments or their intros or whatever, this is hard to do. That you really have to write about things that you didn't really want people to know about. And one of the things I had to write about was, despite my braggadocio, there's a word I don't use often.
Good word.
Sounds like an Italian vegetable.
It does.
The pasta.
I was really scared. I was nervous a lot of the time. I thought the first year was a crazy, crazy time. And we thought they were going to shut the channel down at any minute. We weren't doing well. And we just didn't know what was going to happen. And it was my idea. So I felt this kind of personal responsibility to not only the company, but how about the 200 people who are working with me? And that's their job, I mean, if the thing went down, it was going to get ugly. So I talked about being uncomfortable and being nervous and worrying, and conversations I had with it about it with my wife. Which was hard for her too. She didn't even want to be in the book. I said, "Look, you're in the book, all right?
Get over it.
She's in there enough.
Yeah.
She becomes a character in the book, and maybe that's odd to hear when I refer to somebody in the book as a character, but that's what they become. They become.
Yeah.
It's like you're sketching people you knew or know, and you want to capture them effectively. In a way that's flattering to them most of the time, but getting the important parts. So that's what I wanted to do with my wife, especially because she's my wife and I love her, and she was such an important part of keeping me going in those days. We had just been married, and she kept me going.
Wow, what a thing to be taking on as recently married. I mean, you've got so much that you're working on, and then at the same time, it's like this is happening. And I guess one of the things that I kind of wondered about, as I'm hearing about launching the new TV station, it's a channel that's untested. This has never been done before. And, even the network they're with you, but they're also kind of nervous, and they are there to make money. And when you come down to it, you have to pay the you have to convince people to advertise, because at this time, I mean, this isn't like HBO where it was a paid service. You had commercials on Comedy Central, so the advertisers, you've got to convince the advertisers to come on board, and then you've got to convince the cable networks to, the providers to actually pick up the channel. So as you're doing all of this and you're putting this content out there, what is going through your mind, and how are you handling the fact that you might not know that it's not working until it's too late? And then, how do you kind of determine what you're putting out there? Is it, is it what's going to sell, or is it what you truly want to see on a Comedy Central TV, on Comedy TV? I mean, how do you decide what goes out there, or who decides what goes out there?
We started in a very unconventional way, programming-wise. We started using a lot of short form programming, clips from movies, television, and stand-up comedy. And we got that stuff on a promotional basis. And we also had long form programming. We had movies and other sitcoms and stuff. But we wanted that to be sort of the hallmark of the channel. And a story I tell in the book is we got permission from all the unions, and legally it was all buttoned up to take what we needed and credit them so they'd get promotion. And then right before we launched, after we had gotten all this programming together, the Directors Guild called and said they changed their mind, and they did not want us to use that programming, those clips. And so we were stuck without any programming.
Ooh.
Right before
That's scary.
Wow.
You can imagine my disappointment when I heard that. So, but to answer your question directly, we solved that problem, because I wasn't going to say, okay, well, I guess I'm walking away from this project. We had to figure out what was going on in the air. And then as we got on the air, despite the fact that I said privately I was worried, I was nervous, it was a matter of problem solving. It was a matter of being really effective at understanding what was working, doing more of that, what wasn't working, doing less of that or none of that, and really keeping your eye on the future. Really keeping your eye. Listen, there were people who were trying to sell advertisers. I couldn't program for them that day. I mean, it was ridiculous. Right. So we really had to kind of keep going in the direction we wanted to go, and hope that the advertisers, before you have advertisers, you have an audience. So we were programming and promoting to get the audience in the beginning. And the reviews were terrible, but almost immediately, somebody called us the
really?
It blows me away, because I just love Comedy Central.
I know.
I can't even imagine it getting bad reviews. It's crazy.
I know.
It's the reason I wrote the book, because I think so many people who watch comedy, it's one of the reasons, so many people who watch Comedy Central today just assumed it was a slam dunk hit from the time it went on the air. And I'm here to tell you that it was this close to not happening. I mean, this close. Wow. And a lot of people who were behind it kind of got nervous and got less behind it as time went on. And I was hell-bent on pulling it off, not because of my career, but, it became kind of a personal need to get this thing done right. And I knew it could be. I mean, there was no reason it couldn't be, right? I mean, with enough money and enough people, you can almost do anything, right? So I was convinced of that, right. But we had so much to deal with at the beginning, with programming, with advertisers, with cable operators, with the audience. But I knew it was going to be successful almost immediately, because two things happened. One, comedians started hanging out with us at the studio. They just wanted to hang out, because where did they have to hang out before? Either their mom's house,
the basement.
But
sorry, comedians out there.
they would be hanging out with comedians at clubs. That was where they, at clubs where they were working, and this was another place for them to be, and that was important. Second thing is, before we launched, in the mail, we got a tape of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Yes.
Oh, that show.
I know, it's a great show.
Yes.
And it was these guys in mini with doing this. They ran a local TV station. They were like the guys who ran it, and they put this show on just for fun. And when they heard we were doing a comedy network, they sent their tape. And I thought, okay, two things. Comedians like to hang out with us. I was hoping that would happen. And number two, we are attracting comedy, innovative comedy that nobody else is going to put on the air. You think NBC was going to put that on the air?
No way.
So even though it was a rough start, and I mean the first year or two, it was rough. I knew we were going to be all right if we kept on that track. The other thing is, we go to advertisers, we go to cable operators trying to sell this thing, and they say, we don't like it very much. We think it's stupid. But, my 19-year-old kid came home from college, and he said he loved it. I don't know what he's talking about. So, so at that point, we say, okay, so we're getting a younger audience, and we're trying to sell to older guys, advertising guys.
Right.
It was completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
We solved that problem, too. We had to solve that problem, too. And ultimately, Comedy Central triumphed financially because it's very hard to get a young male audience. And that's a lot of what Comedy Central was doing. I mean, young men weren't watching a lot of TV in those days, except for sports.
Now, to kind of build on that point, now that you've got the advertisers and you've got the cable operators sold on your show, and you're putting content out there, and you're getting some of these comedians that are not always known for being politically correct. And of course, Bill Maher and his show, it tells you from the title what you're gonna get. And then you've got Jon Stewart, and these people who are fantastically funny. And then at the same time, their mouths, you run that risk of their mouths running away with them. And, did you have to worry about, those kinds of things going too far? Comedy and comedians, it takes risks. But successful money-making comedians are taking smart risks. So how do you decide that risk is a smart risk to take without alienating your advertisers, alienating the stuffy old men who are not watching the show, but are actually responsible for the financial well-being of it? How do you decide what's too far and what's not?
The short answer is you don't always get to decide. I mean, for example, Bill Maher is doing a talk show. And he's got people on there and he's doing what he's doing. You could throw yourself in front of the camera at some point, I guess, but, for the most part, it's going out over the air. We did a lot of live television. We covered the State of the Union address in 1992 for the first time live with comedians commenting on it. And Al Franken was the first guy to do that for us. But my point is, we didn't know what Al was going to say ultimately. I mean, it's going out live.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, you got it right. No, you really kind of nailed it. Comedy is about going up to the line and putting your toe across it every now and then and hoping you can pull your foot back before it gets chopped off. And that is really comedy great and exciting, is that kind of tension. So being politically correct as a comedian, it's a different thing. We got in trouble a lot. We got in trouble a lot. Not shut down the channel trouble, but people took offense at some things that were said. I can't remember the joke, but we said something about Ronald Reagan, who of course wasn't president by then, but that for some reason got us in some kind of trouble. I don't even remember what it was. And it was something we did in a promotion. And I was just like, scratching my head, that got us in trouble. But for the most part, we just kind of plowed ahead and hoped that we made it through. The audience wanted us to get in trouble once in a while. And as a matter of fact, I remember the board. We were run by a joint board, MTV guys and HBO guys. And they said at one point, just before we did the State of the Union, we want you guys to get in trouble a little more. Take some more risk. We thought, but that's how we got to some of the riskier stuff, because we realized by that point the board was really behind us. They thought, hey, this thing could work, and they said, okay, if it's going to work and you're going to be a comedy network, you're going to have to, take some chances.
And I like that they gave you that and in fact encouraged it, because I think some of the best things that Comedy Central ever came up with were those risky things that people watched holding their breath for a minute, to see if it was actually going to work. Like, will this be here next time? Is it going to continue? But at the same time, we're so used to comedians and like on the HBO specials where they had a bit more leeway because it was a paid channel and it was expected of HBO that it was going to be a bit more risque. The language, the subject matter, all of those things, we know that that's out there. And so we're kind of watching Comedy Central and holding our breath to see if they're going to get that same level of risk and just kind of that social tugging at, what is truly acceptable and what is just over the line. And I think as viewers, that possibility of trouble is actually an intriguing thing to watch. It's like, the wreck on the side of the highway. You can't look away. And so it's because you're drawn in, like, is this really going to fly on a network? Yeah. And it's great fun to see what you were able to accomplish by being willing to take those risks and really put yourselves out there. I mean, going back to MST3K, it's like, who really would have thought that so many people would enjoy watching a dude and his robots watching and basically heckle movies.
I love it.
And yet, what do we do when we're at home in our living rooms?
The same thing.
We watch and heckle movies.
I do it every
so
week during this pandemic. Every week, my friends and I put on our headphones and watch a show. We go play and we hit at the same time and crack jokes and say lewd comments like for an hour and a half once a week. We do it every week since this thing started. And we always reference Mr. Science 3000. I can't believe I'm talking to you and you're the one who made that whole thing happen.
I
know. The interesting story though is everybody does that to some extent, but comedians love doing that. I mean, guys like you love doing that. I did that as a kid. I wanted to be funny in front of my parents or whoever else was there, and so that's what I did. So the way we got that to Mystery Science Theater 3000 is the head writer said, hey, you know what? Everybody does this. We've got to create a show like this, a watch us watch show. And 3 days later, Mystery Science Theater 3000 came in the mail, so we didn't have to create it. It was it. But
oh my gosh.
And that was really a concept that we use in a lot of places on the channel, like the presidential State of the Union Undressed, as we called it, where we're watching and commenting at the same time. That got us in trouble at the beginning, and it also got us a lot of positive reviews from the critics who said, "Wow, these guys are really onto something. They're doing some really cool television now." So.
And I think Tim's got a question here I'm going to put up on the screen because it kind of goes right along with this. So Tim Kelly, I was kind of holding your question because I knew we were going to kind of work our way back to this. Advice for newer and up-and-coming aspiring comedic artists, perhaps touching on the challenges with the perceived changing world of comedy sensitivity. And I think there's a lot of sensitivity about a lot of things, and it's kind of that finding finding the hot buttons and staying, dancing just around the edges of them. How do you advise somebody who's going into that to kind of tread on that line without going over? What is the sweet spot, and how does a new artist, a new comedian find it?
Well, I think that what comedians are best at is, giving us a lens, their lens, to look at the world through. And the world is a little bit crazy right now, but also some stuff that's coming up, the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, these are things that comedians have been talking about for years and years. So just because now there's a sensitivity to it doesn't mean that it's, left the stage. I think people still have to talk about it, think about it, look at it. Is it being done the right way? What do women comedians have to say about Me Too? I mean, listen, the big innovation, I think, over the last 30 years is more women in comedy, more women stand up, more women.
That's true.
How would we know about this stuff? How would we know how women feel if they don't pour their hearts out on stage? And yeah, sometimes the audience is going to leave. I mean, not all the audience, but some people may be offended. But if that's what you have to talk about, that's what you have to talk about. I think if comedy pulls back from the edge, it's not doing its job. It's not helping us laugh and enjoy the world.
I think that's very true. I think, and especially with the women, and I have to think that Comedy Central really opened those doors for women. I mean, I know when we were, before Comedy Central, right as it's all getting started, the comedians that were on HBO, there were very few women in the mix. I mean, it was a boys' club. And when women would come in, it was the exception rather than the rule. And, it was so many of those women comics that talked about, how hard it was to actually really be getting into that business, and just, it was not a welcoming place necessarily for them. Now, not everybody was having that same experience, but it seemed off balance a little bit. But I think once Comedy Central kind of opened the floodgates to the public and comedy, and again, HBO is a paid channel. So if you didn't have HBO, you weren't seeing this stuff anyway. So once it became cable access over here, unless you went to a club. Unless you went to a club. And then you have, you have age groups that are not necessarily going to be going to those types of places, but that doesn't mean that, the younger set, the older set does not still enjoy great comedy. And Comedy Central kind of put it out there for the masses, which I think really, as a woman, I felt like I was starting to see, more funny women. And they were in places other than the, Friday night family sitcoms. They were actually, they were grittier. They had a mouth on them. They were, real women that were actually telling it like it is and telling it funny. And it was really empowering to see that you could be, you still could be feminine and you still could have a sailor's mouth and be really, really funny and smart at the same time. And, I have to credit Comedy Central for being part of putting that out there, in that arena for people like me that were not necessarily going to be seeing these people in a club or seeing it on HBO, that it brought that into my life and kind of it hopefully encouraged other women comics to really get out there and find their spot in that business. I think there's a lot to be said for Comedy Central giving that opportunity.
When I started Comedy Central, and you talk about the time when HBO didn't have a lot of women comedians on the air. Comedy was considered a guy's game. John Belushi, I think it was John Belushi, famously said, "Women aren't funny." And there was, a little bit of that kind of comic misogyny. I don't know what you call it, but
that's a good word.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
But the fact is that there were lots of women comedians who wanted to tell their story, and good for them for smacking us in the face with what it's like to be a woman, because how else would we know, except if you're a woman. But I really giving us a piece of that experience in a way that disarmed us by making us laugh, okay? Mm-hmm. As opposed to someone screaming in your face saying, exactly. You don't understand me or the thing. I'm amazed, and I am a dyed-in-the-wool feminist, I think. I'm amazed at what women were doing 30 years ago and 50 years ago. How did women put up with that? But things are different now. I'm glad to see it. I'm proud to have been a part of it, I think. A little, very small part of it. But just to see that develop has been very gratifying.
I like your point about taking some of these issues and being able to address them in a funny way, that it is much easier to have that conversation and pull that issue out and just kind of put it out there in front of you if it's funny, as opposed to kind of screaming at you. It opens up more conversation, because humor is something that we can relate to no matter what side of the issue that we're on. And so many things, you can kind of get the humor and maybe not agree totally with the point, but still get the humor, which means you're actually listening to the point too. And so maybe it's opening your mind just a little bit more, because they're funny. You may not agree with everything that they say, but they're funny. And so you're still getting that message. You're still hearing what they have to say. The women making being a woman funny. I mean,
it's God forbid. It's a very powerful way of communicating. And, I don't know if you guys remember this, but when the feminist movement started in the 60s and 70s, at that point, they were accused of not being too serious, I guess. Yeah. Not being able to laugh at their predicament, at what was going on. And I looking back on it, I thought, that was probably a mistake on their part, if to the extent that it was true. I mean, I was a kid, but being able to communicate about this stuff in a funny way is so. Richard Pryor, who put the Black Experience out there, in a way that people hadn't really considered before, and they didn't even know he was doing it at first. I saw Richard Pryor on his first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. I must have been, I don't know, 10, 12. I don't remember what it was, but he was talking about, what it was like being black on the playground, and people didn't even notice that what he was talking about. It was so funny. But that was his experience. And I remember thinking back on it, wow, that's serious stuff, what he was saying. So, yeah, very powerful means of communication.
I think so. And I love that those kinds of things were made accessible to so many people with Comedy Central. And whether that was ever the intent or not, or whether that was kind of just in the back of your minds as you guys were putting it out there and creating your content, determining what was going to go on there, I think that it really did bring those things to the forefront in a way that more people could relate to. We're not necessarily, we're hearing the news, we're hearing all of these things, we're watching videos, we're watching television, we're watching all of this stuff happen out in the world. But then the comedians are bringing it home. They're getting in the minds of the people who are sitting at home watching these things and kind of processing this, but they're doing it in a way that allows us to kind of laugh maybe at ourselves and our own misconceptions, and also kind of bringing something that could be a very heavy subject and kind of making it a little bit more light and accessible, just to kind of laugh at yourself, and then to appreciate the experience of other people, whether it's women, whether it is, a cultural experience. I mean, some of my favorite comedians are women of color, and they are hilarious. And I love that there are more and more of them coming out there and really owning what they're doing on stage. And it's just incredible to watch. And that's something that I feel like has evolved over time. And then you have, and Claire says, Lucille Ball is the queen of comedy. So, I mean, you're watching women kind of come out, and Lucy had her show and she had all of these things, but, having a place, had Lucy had Comedy Central, what would she have been? It could have been a really interesting thing to watch.
There's a book
Lucille Ball
is there's a book to write. Lucy shows up in 1993 and she wants a show.
Yes.
South Park,
I like this,
starring Lucille Ball.
South Park with Lucille Ball. God.
I will also point out, though, that there are successful comedians like Jerry Seinfeld who, they don't push the envelope necessarily that much. I mean, they're talking about their experiences, but
yes,
they're not going to the
it's just
John Mulaney, who I think of as, kind of, you can draw a straight line between him and Jerry Seinfeld, I think. And that comedy, it's all great. I mean, it's all worth listening to find out how these people are seeing the world.
So as you were coming up with, the different shows that you wanted to do, and, as you guys were determining programming, were there, now I know you've talked a bit about Jon Stewart before, you've talked about Bill Maher, and you tell stories in the book about those guys as well. Were there people that you kind of, you knew right away, Jon Stewart, brilliantly funny, incredibly smart. Bill Maher, edgy, just a little bit, confident in himself, just knew what he was wanting to do. Were there people that you kind of watched and kind of were like, I wonder, is that going to be somebody that's going to take off? Let's give them that chance. I mean, did you have people that you really kind of felt like you wanted to kind of be that force behind them to push them out there into the world because you saw something in them that maybe hadn't really been tapped into yet?
I don't recall. You know what? I mean, Comedy Central was. I'm just being brutally honest here. We at the early days, especially, if you had 7 good minutes that you could do on stage, we wanted you to come on in. As far as identifying the winners and losers, occasionally you'd see. I saw Jerry Seinfeld in 1985 the first time, and I was sitting next to his manager. I had nothing to do with comedy in those days, and he was so great. He was so funny, and nobody had ever heard him. And I turned to his manager. I said, if I could buy stock in a comedian, I'd buy that guy. He says, too late. He's already been identified as like the next big comedian, even though he's not the next big comedian yet. So I think that, it was a little bit of the job of the talent people and managers and agents to, to really kind of recognize the brilliance of some of these people who were scattered all over the country the way they are now. I mean, now you have YouTube, so if you're brilliant, you put yourself on the air, or even if you're not brilliant. But in those days, you had to go looking for people, or they had to come and find you, which, again, I think that was our advantage, because we put up a big sign saying, bring us your comedy. And they did.
And I guess you brought up YouTube, and, one of the things that we've had to do, one of the reasons why I started doing this show was because we've had to change just in recent times how authors get the word out to readers. How do we interact with our readers? We can't go do the live events that we used to do. We still want to engage. I mean, that's one of the things that I love best about being an author is the feedback that I get from my readers, and the excitement of signing a book for somebody and putting it in their hands. And I miss that. I really do miss that. And I know that that's sort of the plight of all of us. And we've had to shift how we approach finding our audience, finding our readers. And so doing live events like this is, kind of the changing world of book promotion and getting out there. And, it's hard for some folks to kind of wrap their heads around that this is what we're doing now, these book clubs and different things on Facebook and getting out there on YouTube and being that presence online versus that presence in person. And so we've had to change that. And I can imagine, as you were coming into play with Comedy Central and the Comedy Channel, then you were changing, you're kind of finding yourself in that same kind of pivotal moment that we're in right now as authors. And you were finding and going from that live stage to something more digital where it was a different audience and a different approach. How has it changed, do you think, now? That was a change, a shift in comedy at that time. Now that we've got things like, the internet has exploded and anybody can be funny on YouTube. And how do you see comedy settling in kind of where we are right now in the way that things are changing in just sort of the mass media approach to getting out there? Is YouTube and places like that hurting comedy, or is it kind of watering down the drink, so to speak, or is it bubbling up some talent that maybe would not have had a way to be discovered otherwise? Or is it a combination?
I think B. I think people who have talent are getting discovered earlier because they can get a platform earlier. As far as watering things down, listen, it's like anything else. Comedy talent will out. The best comedians will, and the best programming will be the stuff that prevails, we hope. And I don't think that is going to change. I mean, at the end of the day, as writers, we know that character and story are what, sells entertainment or books or movies or storytellers. You take character and story out, you don't have a whole lot left. And think about it. Comedians, when they're on stage, the way comedy's working now especially, I mean, they're pouring their lives out there. They're telling their story. And they're creating their character for you on stage. So, I'm a big believer in that. I don't think that goes away. It gets presented in lots of different ways. And as far, I will circle back to where you started, which is, how is the lockdown, the virus, the circumstance we find ourselves in, changing everybody's lives? I mean, we're writers. I mean, I was really looking forward to getting out there with my book. I wanted to, wave and say hello and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly I can't, right? Okay, so here's the bad news I found. And by the way, thank you for doing this kind of show because it's a great platform. But the bad news is I find Zoom, like television and this, like any of this, is a fairly cold medium. It's hard to warm up. You don't have the crowd reacting. And it's not just laughing or clapping or standing. You can feel crowd reaction as you go.
Absolutely. There's an energy in any room.
Yeah. So you take that away and you're in a whole different world. So I think we've all kind of had to adapt, and we are working hard to adapt to that. And that's the bad news. the good news is people are reading a lot lately. I mean,
They are.
I remember telling a publisher,
Excellent point, Art.
is this, are we in big trouble? Because I'm selling a lot of books. Not, he didn't mean me, because this was before I launched. He says, we're selling more books than before because people have nothing to do and they're rediscovering that reading is a good thing, which A-OK in my book. So there is that. And then the second thing is, I don't know where all you guys are. I'm on the East Coast in Greenwich, Connecticut, but I gave myself a launch party actually last week, and there were 100 people there from all over the place. A lot of my friends who wouldn't otherwise have seen me.
Nice.
And it was
awesome.
It was a blast. And I really wanted to make it fun. And I thought about it for a long time. And I said, I'm going to have a comedian interview me because it'll be a riot, right? And it was. Wow. And so finding ways to up the energy level on these things is, I think, what everybody's working hard to do. I know I am.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's, for me, that's why I do groups. I don't necessarily do a one-on-one with folks because it is different. It's a different dynamic when there's just two of you there and it's kind of just a give and take, but you're not feeling the reaction. You're not, there's right. not that energy. And, coming from a live theater background and, I did theater my entire life and, Mike and Laura have as well. There's something to be said about, the flat audience, where you're doing everything that the audience the night before laughed at. Why aren't they laughing? But there is something that there's an exchange of energy with a live performance. And it's very different when it is on a screen and there's electronics in the way and you're not getting that energy straight from your audience. And I can't imagine just having that completely stripped away. And for me, I do love the live events because I'm a teacher because of that. I mean, I consider teaching every day as like a performance art as well. And now I'm teaching online. I feel the pain of having that stripped away and having that lack of audience. Yeah, and it's why I do kind of what I do, the way that I do it. And this is something that Annie McDonald and I talked about when we first were coming up with the idea for this show, is that we wanted to make sure that there was a group, that it was fun, that it was light, that it was engaging, that we're going to talk about things that weren't going to happen in a typical interview, that there was going to be a different dynamic altogether, so that people got to know the authors and the authors got to feel, some connection, whether it was to the authors that are on the show with them or the folks in the comments as well. And I hope that we're succeeding in that. I really do. And I hope that this is becoming a fun place for readers to find those authors and for authors to find each other. And I've had some great opportunities to connect some authors who didn't know each other before, who, sitting here on a Zoom screen, actually had a great time together. So hopefully more of this is going to surface and more of these opportunities are going to come up, because I feel like we are having to really change what we're doing. And I think we're having to change not just for the market and for the situation, but also for our own mental health. I feel like we need this. We need that human connection. And we don't necessarily find it, like you said, kind of, digitally it's not just, it can be cold. So hopefully we're creating some warmth, doing things like this and putting some folks together to feel that exchange of energy, even if it is through a screen.
I feel the warmth. I feel it.
Do you feel the warmth, Laura Kemp?
You
feel that tonight.
Everything's a musical, always.
Everything's a musical. Everything's a musical. Theater kids, everything's a musical. Thank you, Sarah Wendt, who says the second line show is a blast. Thank you. I hope that it is. And what would a party be without some games? So we're going to play a couple of games here. Game time, because it's a party.
I get all perked up. Are we playing cards, board game? I'm up for any kind of game.
When are we playing advance? I hate games.
Oh, this is...
I'll play, but I'm just...
You're going to play. It's more of a guessing game. It's more guessing. So normally what I do on my show, since it's new, I'm a New Orleans girl, and I write New Orleans and all that. I have my New Orleans history and mystery, and normally we tell ghost stories. Today, I'm going to see if you know what the hell I'm talking about.
Ooh,
So we're going to let you guess
Oh, wow.
what some of these Louisiana phrases actually mean. Okay?
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Some of these words are different, and then some of these words would mean something else if you were somewhere else. So let's see if we know. Now, those of you who've been watching Hey My Louisiana folks in the comments, hush your face for a little while. Just be quiet. We're gonna let them guess this. I know you know. So shh. All right, so the first word that we are going to try is lanyap. Now, those of you who've watched the show for a little bit, I've explained this every week because this is one of the segments that we do. Who knows what lanyap is?
Can you use it in a
Is that when
sentence?
two people who work in IT are trying to solve network issues and they get together and have a little talk? It's a lanyap.
It's a lanyap. I like it.
Is it
wrong,
clothing?
but I like it.
It
Clothing?
sounds like an abbreviation.
It sounds like some kind of like,
Cape or
is it
something?
like a cord, like a lanyard you wear around your neck, but instead of like an ID tag, it's like a sausage?
Good idea, but no. So I could say I went to the bakery to pick up a cake, but the baker threw in a little lanyap, and now I've got half dozen cookies too.
Is it fried?
Mm-mm.
Baked?
Lanyap, Tim's
say, like,
got it.
freebies? Like you got some extra, you got a few more, like a lanyap. Hey, I'll give you a
little
lanyap.
something extra.
Is it really? No.
Lanyap. It's a
Oh,
little
that's crazy.
something extra.
Lanyap?
Lanyap, Lagnappe, lanyap. It looks like lagnappe, but it's lanyap.
Oh.
And lanyap means something extra.
What's the derivation?
French.
It's French?
It's a Cajun word. It's a Cajun word. Yeah. All right, so our next one is, and it does not look like it sounds either, gris-gris, which is spelled G-R-I-S, G-R-I-S, so gris-gris. What is gris-gris?
Isn't it food of some kind?
Tip. It's a tip. You leave it
Some kind of a cheese.
The tip.
So like a cheese that comes on the side of like French fries. Here's your fries and a little gris. What is it?
No.
I've heard of this. I've heard of this.
All right, so if I use it in a sentence, we could say something like, y'all better behave or grandma's going to put the gris-gris on you.
Oh, the smackdown.
The hex.
It's a hex.
Ooh.
It's a voodoo
Is
curse
it like
or
her
spell.
shoe?
Yeah. It's a voodoo curse or spell. Belt. Belt. All right, so another one that is not spelled like it is pronounced is puro. A puro, P-I-R-O-G-U-E. It looks like pirogue. Sometimes they say pirogue. Puro or pirogue. What is a pirogue? If you've ever heard that song, jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo, I'm going to go pull my piro down the bayou.
Oh, I have heard that.
Now I want to hear you sing that song to me later.
Yeah, I love that song. Is it a boat?
I'm gonna go pull my piro down the bayou. It's a boat. It's a boat. It's a long canoe, actually made out of a single tree trunk.
Oh, okay.
However, lots of people in Louisiana will use it to describe something that others might call like a John boat or something like that.
Oh, okay.
A really small boat is a piro.
Yeah.
Now, another one that you might see or hear a lot of people say, especially down in New Orleans and down kind of around Creole country, down in Cajun country, is chat. And they will say chat, but it's spelled like Cher, not like Cher, the singer. Chat is how it's pronounced, but it's spelled like Cher.
I'm from Michigan.
Can
so
you use
this
it
is
in a
hard.
sentence?
I'm so far out of the bayou.
I feel like I'm in the spelling bee. Can you use it in a sentence? Can you? How
Use
many
it in a
syllables?
sentence? Oh, Cher, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Is it
like honey or sweetie?
It is.
Yeah.
It is a term of endearment.
Oh,
Exactly. It is a term of endearment. So it's like sweetie. Yeah, it's short for Sherry. So, Sherry is my sweetie. So it's actually short. It's the abbreviated version of my Sherry. So it's Cher. It's the first part of that word.
This is a nose cap on my head.
Yeah, more fancy.
My little
Yes, now we're learning French. All right. So now in church, the Holy Trinity is one thing. In Louisiana, the Holy Trinity is something else. What is in the Holy Trinity? It is not the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost.
Bleachers?
Crawfish, corn, and potatoes.
No. You start most Louisiana dishes with these three things, and they are vegetables.
Alcohol.
Pepper.
Peppers is one. Bell peppers is one.
Okay.
Ooh, good catch. Nice. We got one. That's good.
Got one. What else
Onions?
might you start a Cajun dish? Onions is two.
Oh, snap. See, that goes great with bell peppers. All right.
What else?
Okra.
Not okra, although okra is in a lot of Cajun food too. But
Pepper
Deborah
or
King's got it in the
some
comments.
kind.
Deborah King's
So,
got
like-
it. It's celery. It's celery. Onions, bell peppers, and
celery.
celery are the holy trinity. And Deborah King, shout out Chicago girl over there. Author Deborah King getting them down with the Louisiana terms here. Go, Deborah. All right. Now this one is another Cajun word. It is a fado-do. What is a fado-do?
A done deal.
I like that.
Fado.
No.
That's my last suggestion.
You have to use it in a sentence. You have to.
Yeah.
It's like a.
Wait. My feet hurt so bad after being at that fado-do all night long.
Oh, party. A dance.
It's a dance party.
Fado.
It is a Cajun dance party. And fado-do actually literally translated to go to sleep. And so it's called a fado-do, and you may say that they tell the children to go do because that just means the fado-do means that the kids would dance all night long and they would wear themselves out and put themselves to sleep without a fuss. And so a fado-do.
You want
All right.
to a
It'd be
fado.
like, it was a loud knocking. Now I'm a faded adult.
I don't know, fado-do. Yep. There you go. Now, if I order my sandwich, my po' boy dressed, what does that mean?
Popo dress has
Sounds like
sauce on
like
it.
Thousand Island dressing.
The word mayo.
Mayo. That's
Oil
one.
and vinegar.
Not oil and vinegar. Order it dressed. You're on the right track. Yeah.
With sauce, mustard.
It's really simple. It's a
Tiny
really
bow tie.
fancy word for something that most people put a sandwich anyway.
Bread.
It's mayonnaise, lettuce, tomato, and pickles.
Oh, okay.
Now, when you
Okay.
order a po' boy in Louisiana, it's with everything on it, which is one of those things. So you can order a po' boy in Louisiana dressed or undressed. And so if it's undressed, it's just whatever the meat was on the French bread. And otherwise, if you get it dressed, those are the things you put on it. So that's everything dressed. Yeah.
Mm.
All right. If I am making groceries, what am I doing?
Shopping.
Yes, I'm grocery shopping. Way to go, Art.
Right away.
That was over quick.
That's all right.
Sentence
All
ready.
right. Now there are some other things. If I am saving the dishes, what am I doing?
You're like my annoying roommates when I was in college, and you just stack them up in the sink and wait till I do it.
Kind of the opposite of that. Kind of the opposite of that. Saving the dishes. What is
Yeah,
saving the
for someone else, or not eating on dishes. You're eating on something that's not a dish.
I can also save groceries. I can save the laundry. I can save a lot of things. But if I'm saving the dishes,
What?
what am
No.
I doing?
What did you say? Wash the laundry. Wash.
Are
I
you
can
eating
wash
out?
groceries.
Maybe you're going out to eat. No dishes.
You're not gossiping about anybody.
No, but I
Ooh,
like
that
that.
sounds good.
That's all I got.
Saving
Bye.
the dishes is putting them away. So if you're saving it, you're putting it where it goes. So I can save the groceries. I can put the groceries away. I can put the laundry away. I can put the dishes away. So you're saving the dishes.
Something is gonna take it.
Saving the dishes. All right. So along the lines of our, I have more of these, but we're gonna go to something else. We're gonna do our Louisiana lanyap, and lanyap meant a little something
No
extra.
extra. There's a quiz.
So our
That was the
Louisiana
sausage
lanyap today, yes, the Louisiana the sausage. The Louisiana lanyap for today is "Can you say?" And this is the Louisiana geography edition of this particular game here. So Let's take a look at this one. So this first word up here that starts with an A, does anyone know what that word says?
It
Atchafalaya.
looks like Atchafalaya.
Yeah,
You're
Atchafalaya.
close.
Atchafalaya.
Octophallia.
Close. And it has more to do with the
Out here in Los Angeles, they say
syllable.
Atchaplaya. It's kind of different, but
Atchafalaya. It's Atchafalaya. That's where the emphasis goes in the word. Atchafalaya, the Atchafalaya Basin. So there's you'll hear Atchafalaya a lot. All right, what is the next one that starts with an N? Now, if you are from Texas, you may say this slightly differently, but this is the Louisiana pronunciation of that one.
nacho cheese.
Nacho cheese.
Not nacho cheese.
Hachitoches.
Yeah. Nacho cheese.
Nope.
Nacho cheese.
Nacho
Machu
Tochi.
Picchu?
Machu Picchu.
Yeah, nachitoches, he said.
Nacho cheese. I like that. I like that
Nacho
better than what it actually is.
I
Vale, you
give.
It's Natchitoches.
Oh,
Of course it is.
I never would have
That
got
is
that again.
Natchitoches. Natchitoches. If you are in Texas, you might call it Nacogdoches. But it's in Mississippi. They've got like a couple of different variations on it in Mississippi and Texas, but in Louisiana, it's Natchitoches. All right, that next one, that funny looking one.
Oh, goodness.
This is one of those, you're from Louisiana. If you can say
But
this.
this. Remember, I'm from Michigan.
Chupatula?
Chupatula.
Chupatulas? Chupacabra?
Chupacabras.
That y'all are all around it.
Don't know.
Remember, it's weird places that they put the emphasis on the different syllables.
Chupatulas to chupatulas.
Oh, close.
Chupatulas.
To chup.
Chopatulas? Chopatu. I don't know.
You're
Chopatulas?
so close. You're so close. Chopatulas. Chopatulas. And Chopatulas is a street and it's like a river. There's all kinds of Chopatulas in there, but Chopatulas. So the TCH just makes the ch sound. Chopatulas. And so they tend to put that emphasis kind of in the weird part of the word, like Atchafalaya. Natchitoches is at the beginning, but then you got Chopatulas. So sometimes they move that accent way down in the word. All right. So what have we got for this next one? And this one is
It's Pontchartrain.
It's Pontchartrain. That's a good one. Pontchartrain. And Lake Pontchartrain is home to the longest bridge in either the world or the United States. I think it's the United States.
Wow.
All right, this next one is fun to say.
Bogachito?
Bogachito.
Close. Close.
Bogachito.
Shorten that I sound.
Boquito? Boquito. It sounds like Spanish. Boquito.
I got nothing.
He got nothing.
Nope.
Bogachita.
Ooh, that sounds like
wow, that's so different than anything I would imagine.
That one's always fun to say when you're a kid in Louisiana because you almost feel like you're saying something you shouldn't.
Yeah, it sounds like a naughty word.
That's like a bad word. All right, so kind of borrowing from Chopatulas up there, what do you think this next one is?
Chifuente?
Chefun.
Funte? Chifunte?
Chefunte. He makes terrific
This is almost unfair because it actually has a letter in it, a sound in it that isn't in the letters. So I may have to give you this one.
Che Funkste.
Oh, you got part of you got one of the sounds in there that wasn't actually in the letters.
You should start asking us what we think these things are. This seems like some kind of a weird, I don't know, some kind of a cheese dip from Greece or something. I don't know. What is this?
Cheese dip. This one is chifuncta. It's got that harder sound between the the last little couple of parts there. So it's chafunkta. So that one is chafunkta. What about that next one?
Tangapahoa.
Oh, you almost had it. Instead of the hard G,
Tangipahoa.
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 That one's fun to say. That's got a nice ring to it.
Tangipahoa is fun to say.
It is.
Tangipahoa, it does sound Hawaiian. It's a lot of the words that we've got here, like Chapatulas and Chafalaya and Tangipahoa and Chafunkta. These are all actually Native American words that, some of them are French and then some of them are Native American words that we've there's a huge Native American population down there that, of course, has been displaced. Tangipahoa is one of those words. Now, the next one's French. So what do you think of that one?
Gross tet. Gross tate.
And that's how it should be, gross tet. But we actually say it, like you said it the second time, gross tate. I don't know why, because they know how to speak the French, but for some reason, gross tet becomes gross tate.
Something. It means big something, right?
Head. Big head.
I'm not making any inappropriate jokes here. No inappropriate jokes out of me.
All right. So now if we've got Bogachita up here in a Chafalaya, this next to last one becomes
Bogafalaya.
Yeah.
Bogfalaya. Bogfalaya. You actually, instead of Boga, Chita, it becomes Bog. They drop that last part of it and it becomes Bogfalaya. I don't know why. I do not know why they dropped the in the Boga, but it's Bogfalaya. All right, this last one is a Native American word. It is a parish. It is a river. Lots of things. And it's just a lot of fun to say. What is that last word?
So Wachita?
That's one of my friend's dog bites me. Ouchita.
Ouchita or Wachita.
Owashita?
Wachita.
Owachita?
Wachita?
Wakita?
This one is Washita.
What?
Washita.
Say that again.
Washita. Washita. That one.
It's so dirty. Washita. Please, Washita.
Back, Nolan Nash. I'm gonna do a Michigan version of this.
Right? We need to do like a second line after dark, and we can all pretend that we know what those words are and do our own versions of that stuff.
There you go. I think one day we should make it a drinking game. If you mispronounce it, you're gonna drink.
Not a lot.
I mean, you be in a lot of trouble doing
that. Yeah, that's kidding.
Oh my gosh.
Big trouble.
We have been having a great time, and Art, I'm so glad that you've joined us today. I know it's
great.
We've spent our hour plus some, and it's just gone by so quickly. Annie says that I don't talk about my own books enough, and so I'm going to answer one of Annie's questions. And Annie McDonald, dear friend, and I wish she could have been here tonight. She's watching. I miss having her on as a co-host and a guest host, but she's playing producer for the show right now, and she's enjoying the heck out of that. But she has sent me a question from Annie that she wanted me to ask, and it has to do with humor. And so she said, for Annie's question today, what made you decide to put humor in Celine's character? And in Crescent City Moon, my first book, Celine is vicious. She is evil through and through, but at the same time, there are moments with Celine that are funny. And one of the things that made me want to put that in there for her is so many of my favorite bad guys and my favorite villains have that element of humor in them that makes you almost wish they would succeed. It's like you almost want to pull for them because it's like, you're entertaining. I kind of like you. You're kind of the dark side of me. And she's kind of that way too. And she is just nasty. But at the same time, there are certain times that her sense of humor and the fact that she's thoroughly enjoying herself kind of comes through. And so she gets that humor. She's singing bawdy drinking songs in the middle of her husband's funeral. And, these things are just, it's madness. I mean, she's absolutely a lunatic, but at the same time, thoroughly enjoying it. And so she has not lost her sense of humor entirely. It's just what she finds funny is a bit darker. And so there's always something inside of us that, whether we want to admit it or not, sometimes we can find the dark things a little funny too. She just happens to roll with it. And so it made it a lot of fun to write that dark character that had that sense of humor too, that was able to find, the evil that she was doing a little bit funny, and what she was able to accomplish kind of messing with people a little bit funny. So she's an interesting character for that. And I liked having that bit of humor to offset the viciousness, because I think it balances her character a little bit by doing that. So I like her vicious sense of humor. It's kind of fun. So speaking of Crescent City Moon, it is available. Of course, it came out in October of last year. It's available at barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, and target.com. And you will need to get your hands on a copy of Crescent City Moon, because Crescent City Sin is coming out for Halloween, y'all. And Crescent City Sin, Laura just finished reading Crescent City Sin for me. And oh gosh.
So
Laura, I love when she's reading for me, because I get these texts from her and she's like,
yes. And, it's the interactive part we don't get as authors very much,
Yes.
We don't get to see that real time stuff, and I wish I could. Sometimes I love it when my readers are reading kind of in real time how they're enjoying things. So,
and I think that's something that readers need to know, that we actually say that. Yes. I mean, you get to do the same thing with the audiobooks. And I love that Mike doesn't read the audio. He doesn't read the whole book before he starts recording, because he wants to be surprised as he goes along too, and kind of get that genuineness in the voice. And told that story before. And I love that about that. I think it adds so much to the performance, and it adds so much to the enjoyment. And as an author, we need that. There's that validation. I mean, coming from the theater background and that energy in the room kind of thing, it's can be that response that spurs us on, y'all, to keep doing what we know is working, and keep doing what we know that you're liking and really enjoying. So guys, as you're reading, reach out to those authors, go to their websites, find their contact page, find them on Facebook, let them know how much you're enjoying what they're doing, because it's truly important. And not just for Amazon to kind of put our books in front of other people, but it feeds our souls as writers. And we write from our souls. And so when we're pouring all of that out, you giving us that comment, that feedback, those good vibes, pour that energy back in that we need to do. We need to have that to keep going. So please reach out to authors. I'm not sure if people, I feel like so many people are like, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to bother them. You know what? Bother us. Please bother us, because we absolutely want to hear that. So, guys, please do that.
Especially now. I'm just walking around my condo, bored out of my mind during this whole situation. Please write me a note. I'll answer you personally. I'll leave a message on your cell phone in different character voices that you like. Just engage. Fun.
Yes, we absolutely need it. And I think that's it's lifeblood to any author, just like it is to any performer. And, we need that, just like you would write fan letters to your favorite celebrities and stuff when you were a kid, guys, even as adults, please write to us. Please, let us know that this is meaningful to you in some way, that you've gotten something out of it, that it just is time well spent for you. Even just that is often enough to kind of just give us that little glimmer through our day that sometimes we just really need. And with all of us balancing so many things and juggling so many things, and this being such a challenging time for all writers, and that's, I think, something that has really been kind of a common thread in, with a lot of the writers that I've been in touch with. It's a hard time to write right now. It's hard to separate reality from, the fiction that you have in your head and just what you want to get down on paper, and to really feel creative in this moment. And some of it, I think, is that, our mind is pulled into so many kind of, fractured places. But also, if we're writing something that we love to do in kind of troubled times, we almost, I think, in many ways feel guilty for doing that, especially if we're writing something lighthearted and fun. It's like, I'm not in a lighthearted and fun time. Is it okay for me to be enjoying this and feeling good about this? Or, is there that kind of some guilt, like I should be out protesting something, I should be out, changing the world right now, but I got to stay inside. And so I'm going to do my part to stay inside, and I'm conflicted. I've had all this time at home, and I really haven't written very much because of kind of just conflicted emotions and finding it very hard to put words on paper. So hearing that feedback from people is definitely a very helpful thing to kind of motivate us and get us going. Look at Annie chiming in. Thank you, dear heart.
Annie,
we love you.
We miss you.
We love you. We miss you so much. And Mike bringing his books to life is just amazing. Absolutely. And I love that you do that. I love that you perform your books, that you don't just read them. Tara asked if Crescent City Moon is available on audiobook. Not yet, but hopefully soon we will do that as well. I want to make sure that you guys know where to find our authors. Please support them as you're reaching out. You got to read their books too. So we've got Art's book, Constant Comedy, How I Started Comedy Central and Lost My Sense of Humor, and Evening in the Yellow Wood by Laura Kemp, which you want to go ahead and get your hands on now too, so that you are ready for when Snow in Summer drops in November, and it is going to be amazing. I know you guys love Evening in the Yellow Wood, and here is the yellow leaf that Laura mentioned at the top of the show. There it is.
There it is.
There for you. And Project 137 is a great one by a friend of mine and Laura's as well, and of Mike's, Seth Augenstein's fabulous book, Project 137, which Mike does an amazing job narrating on that one as well. So get your hands on any and all of these books, folks. Leave some reviews and let us know what you think, as well as some feedback. And also, if you want to watch some past episodes of the show, if this is your first time tuning in, you're like, what the heck? They've been doing this for, this many episodes? Yes, we have. And they all live on Nolan Nash Entertainment on YouTube. So you can watch those past episodes where we've had some amazing guests in the past as well. We've got some amazing shows coming down the pipe. I feel like, there's that Sherlock Holmes thing, which is what case is his favorite case? It's the last one. And so that's kind of how I feel about my show, which show is my favorite show, the last one. I always enjoy this time, and I am eternally grateful for all of you for taking some time out of your evening to be with us all tonight. I know that the viewers enjoy it, and I know we didn't get to as many comments and questions as there are, and I will go back into all of the locations where we broadcast live tonight, and I'll be popping back into the comments to kind of catch up with some of you guys as well. But you guys are awesome that are watching it live. Those of you who go back and watch it, we appreciate you there as well. Please leave those comments too. We do continue to check on those. Thank you, Laura, for hosting us on your group page, Camp as well. Annie, for allowing us to be on the right review, and all those places where we are grateful to be there. We're grateful for you spending some time with us. And we hope that you have had as much fun as we all have. And Art, congratulations on a fabulous book that's getting some incredible support and reviews out there. And we wish you all the success in everything that you are doing now. And thank you for sharing some insight into a time and a channel that has been a very big part of our lives. And it's what you created. Whether it was hard getting it off the ground or not, please know that heavy lift was worth it. You touched
Thank you so much, Katrina, and thank you for having me. It's been
you are welcome, and it has been a true joy and an honor, and I appreciate you spending some time with us. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been the Second Line Show. I'm Nolan Nash. Have a good night.